From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption, and we are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all of our previous episodes, our current episode, and all the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. And with me this week is some asshole that made me watch a movie that I'm really pissed off about, and his name is Sean. He also happens to be the host of the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. Sean, how are you doing today?
I got a big fun fact for you, John. You want to hear it? You want to hear this fun fact?
Let's go.
You are listening to the 42nd ranked Apple Podcast for TV and film in Ghana. Fuck yeah.
You know what? This movie might have given me gonorrhea, so let's go.
Nowhere but up from here, baby. Nowhere but up from here.
Yeah. Up, burning, whatever,
Burning
What have you
up.
been watching this week, Sean?
I watched a couple things. Surprise, surprise.
Okay.
I think the first thing I'd like to highlight, maybe not for great reasons, but it wasn't horrible. There is a movie, a documentary that just came out. It's called Skate Face, and it's a skate documentary. It mostly tells a story like of art and skateboarding, the evolution of not only skateboarding, because they do cover a lot of skateboarding stuff, but also skateboard art. And I don't mean just like deck art, but also art behind like the brands and stuff that we know behind skateboarding. Like, I mean, it goes back to like Vision and Rat Bones and Bones Brigade and all that stuff. Tony Hawk, like early stuff like Tony Alva and all that. It's a pretty cool documentary, but I feel like it's one of those things where it's like an hour and 40 minutes and it could probably just be like 45 to 50 minutes. One of those things where they just really draw it out a long time. But
I'm just saying this because I've watched maybe too many like documentaries about the quote unquote early days of skateboarding. It's just a lot of the same stuff that you've seen with new wrapping paper on it.
it kind of is. It focuses a lot more instead of the actual art of skateboarding. No pun intended. Like actually the art in skateboarding, more of art in skate rather than art work on skateboarding stuff. So it was interesting. You can only be inundated so much with this stuff until you're just like, you kind of start tuning it out and you're like, well, that looks cool. That looks cool. That looks cool. I don't care. But it was fine. It's a little bit too much. It was just like, if this was like a mini, even like a web series where they had like, 6 to 7, 10-minute episodes that kind of focus on one era or maybe one artist, it would be better done, I think, in an hour and a half kind of format. It's just a little bit too much, I think.
I don't know if this has been done. It might already be out there, but I'd like to see like a short, I stress the word short, documentary on like the early days of skate videos. Because that's where guys like Spike Jonze came from. He started just with a camera and a skateboard and doing stuff like that and, all those types of things. I almost feel like if you could find whatever, I don't know if cutting room floor stuff is the right thing, because I'm sure there was no cutting room, for at that time, but whatever type of stuff went into those types of videos, just because, at that point, that wasn't about a career, that was about a passion project type thing. Like that might be interesting to watch for like a short little, 1 to hour and a half type little documentary that can't think of where I've actually seen anything like that.
I think that's tough because a lot of that shit's just kids skating with a camera.
Sure.
I cannot remember, and if I can remember where I saw it, I'll put it in the show notes, but there was a YouTube video, and I want to say it was like 10 to 15 minutes long. It may have been longer. It was more about like the filming of skate and how certain cameras are used for it, but it goes in and talks to a lot of people because there was a particular camera, and I can't remember which one it was at this point, like a camcorder / video camera that a lot of skate
iPhone 4.
No, before that, skate videography and stuff, skate filmmakers use this particular kind of camera. And there was a particular reason why. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll link it in the show notes if I can find it. That was a pretty cool little kind of sidetrack, because that's not a thing that you see a lot of, like even photography, skate photography and photographers. You see a lot about the skaters, a lot about how skateboarding evolved over time, but you don't, and of course the characters and the tricks, and I mean characters as in the people, and the artwork, like I just mentioned, but you don't really get to see a lot of the people that are behind the scenes. It's always very hyper-focused on the actual skaters themselves. So that'd be a pretty cool, probably little short documentary to at least cover some of the key figures in that. Like you think of, God, I think it was maybe even like a Big Brother documentary that I watched that may have gotten into it.
I want to say, I remember, I think it was on that Beastie Boys. I guess it's an autobiography type thing they did that was on.
They made that movie off the table book or whatever.
Yeah, it was on. I think it was on Apple.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
I think they went into a little bit of that with Spike Jonze because he did that Sabotage video for them. And they talk about how they found him because of skate videos. But I don't think it went into anything like what we were just saying. So
yeah, like I said, I'll see if I can find the video and I'll link it. So that was Skate Face. I watched that. I also watched. So we talked about Hard Knocks a little bit last week, and I kind of touched on. I think I touched on getting touchdown. I think I touched on getting YouTube TV and all that stuff. And so I've been recording all the 30 for 30s on ESPN because that's like I like a lot of those episodes. And I ended up watching, I don't know if it's how recent it was, but it was the 30 for 30, which was the race to the 1997 Heisman Trophy. Did you end up seeing that at all?
I've seen that one.
It's pretty good. It covers, so the 1997. Is
that the Charles Woodson year?
Yeah. Yeah, Charles Woodson,
Okay.
Peyton Manning, Ryan Leaf, and Randy Moss were the finalists for that. And the thing,
God, one of those guys is not like the others, huh?
yeah, one was not so successful. Actually,
Right.
I think now he's a commentator or something. But anyways, we're talking about Ryan Leaf. But the thing that I liked about the way that they did it,
technically, we're talking about all of them if you're going to call him a commentator. But
yeah, but Ryan Leaf had the biggest turnaround from being from the highest to the lowest to now being somewhat in the middle. But the thing that I liked about the way that they made this is that they didn't do any modern day interviews with any of them, with anybody. And it's all clips from 97 in the actual race, like when they happen chronologically. So they'll take like ESPN newscasts or analysis, or they'll take the college analysis. They show a lot of stuff from College Game Day, and they mix it in and they follow them throughout the season. And they talk about how, I mean, it starts from like Peyton Manning committing to his senior year at Tennessee. And they go on and kind of show everybody, and they have when they talk to the actual people involved, it's clips of interviews from that time frame. So I thought that was a cool way to present it, because a lot of sports documentaries rely on talking to the athletes now, and they reflect on it. And it was really cool to see them just kind of talking about it in the moment rather than having them reflect on it in retrospect.
It's one thing ESPN does really well is that 30 for 30 series. I mean, there's a couple duds in there because they've done probably like 60 or 70 of them by this point. There's a lot.
Yeah, they've done quite a few. Yeah.
But the ones that they get right are some of the better sports documentaries. Like, I always go back to the one, God, I can't think of the guy's name now. It was about the guy who tried to buy the New York Islanders, but he didn't have the money, so he basically scammed the NHL.
Oh, yeah. He was buying it for his son or whatever, right?
No, he was buying it for him, but he just kept like basically lying his ass off.
He was like defrauding people or
Big
something.
Shot. Yeah. He basically, he'd pass like a bad check or something, or like he'd pull a Costanza and like intentionally forget to sign the check so they couldn't cash it or something like that. And they'd call him and they'd still sign over the, I guess not a lease, but the ownership of the Islanders to him. But they'd be like, we need you to either give us a new check or sign this or something. But yeah, I'll get to it later. And they just never did.
Yeah, that whole legacy of 30 for 30 is really good. And then because Bill Simmons was one of the people that kind of started that. And then when he left ESPN to do The Ringer, they've done a few things. I know he was responsible for the Andre the Giant documentary that was on HBO or
John
Max.
Spano. That's his name.
Okay. But Simmons started doing stuff on Max. And then I don't know if he's still with The Ringer, I think. But I don't know if they're still even doing any of that stuff. So 30 for 30 is kind of continuing that legacy.
Doesn't he own The Ringer now? Or isn't that like
I think he has. Yeah, I think that, or he's like a part person. It's hard to tell who owns anything these days.
Well, yeah. I know his name's on like more shit of that than not, but I don't know. I don't find The Ringer to be anything special, but the 30 for 30 stuff is great.
And then lastly but not leastly, I watched, started a new series that's on Max. Speaking of Max, it's called Chimp Crazy.
That's one of mine.
Oh, no shit.
I started that right before we came on because I was like, I have about an hour and a half. I need to watch something. So I'm one episode in, but
so am I.
Go on.
So why don't you tell us about Chimp Crazy? And since that's your one thing.
Well, I have two things, but it's one of my two
one
things.
Of your two things.
So.
We'll transition into John, host of the 42nd most popular TV and film podcast in Ghana for August. Why don't you tell us about Chimp Crazy?
Chimp Crazy, I mean, the extreme Cliff Notes version is it's Tiger King, but with a woman instead of a guy and with chimps instead of tigers. is the extreme Cliff Notes version. Someone that I work with was talking about this show, just saying like, oh, she's a crazy lady and she has chimps. I'm like, is this a documentary or is this like fiction or like what genre am I looking at? Like, I don't really want to watch this as if it's just some like sitcom that happens to be on HBO. And the first thing they tell you in this documentary is that it's the same people that made Tiger King. They're just now on this one with a stand-in for the director because apparently that guy can't get in with any of these like animal nutcases now. Being only one episode in, like the majority of this episode, they do show the dude who had his nose bit off, which I was pretty happy about that. I was like, don't these like, I don't know, I don't know enough about chimps to know how accurate this is, or apes, or they're chimps, right?
Primates.
Chimpanzees.
Yeah. These are definitely chimps.
Yeah. So I don't know if always, but I've heard that like with chimps, they get to a certain age and then they just become feral and get really like aggressive with humans. And again, not a zoologist, but I've heard a lot of times they have to put them down because once they get to that point, they just become like super aggressive and will basically just beat the shit out of anything like to death. So I was like, well, that's good. They show them fuck up one of these handlers that probably have it coming. But this one episode in, I don't know about you, but my overall feeling with it so far is like, something's just not fucking adding up here. Like,
yeah, something is not on the level.
Yeah, like they very much so go over like a crash course of like, there's this lady, Connie something or other, and she's got these chimps and she hired these people. And then, you know, they're putting chimps in movies and doing birthday parties. And there's little hints, like they show a chimp grab a kid's leg and, like I said, bite a dude's face off a little bit. Some of his take a nibble on it.
Well, they don't even actually show that, do they?
Well, they show it the aftermath. Like they show them all healed up. No, they didn't show the actual like chimp assault. That would be a
little too much.
I would have been clapping. Fuck them. And then they, at least where I left off at, and it sounds like where you did, they basically had PETA get the courts involved, intervene, and take all the chimps. But now there's one chimp that's like
missing.
Presumably, I'm assuming that the I guess second in command or the second chimp lady, because there's technically two chimp ladies in this. It's heavily implied that she took this chimp for her own keeping, but they didn't say it flat out yet. So I guess after we get done with this, I'll probably get high and watch chimps.
Just kind of a little bit of backstory is that this kind of takes place in Missouri. And in Missouri, I didn't know this, but Missouri doesn't really have any laws behind what kind of animals you can own, or at least they have very lax rules.
Or they did at the time.
Yeah, at the time. Right. So this lady is responsible, Connie, whatever her name is responsible for, I think they said something like 80% of chimps that you see they're in captivity, but chimps that you see like on TV and all this stuff. She is a breeder of chimps.
Breeding cards and
all that. And they had some of the chimps that she has are the ones that are the famous ones that you would, famous quote unquote chimps that you would see on greeting cards, Hallmark cards and whatnot. And she is kind of getting up in years and this woman volunteers to help. And then she ends up kind of running the show for this Connie lady that is kind of aging out, and it's just too much pressure. She doesn't like the spotlight. I don't know about you. I have a very like healthy respect and fear for chimps because I know that they are like 3 or 4 times stronger than a human being. They can practically just tear you limb from limb if they want at any time.
I heard that they can rip your face off, and I'm like, I'm going to keep them on the other side of said, I'll go look at them at the zoo, but I'm not getting anywhere near interested on going on the other side of the glass or the cage or whatever.
I'm good. I mean, they have footage of these chimps just going nuts when there's other males.
I like my face being on my skull where it belongs.
Yeah, agreed. I'm right there with you. So it's intriguing. Like I find that whole thing really intriguing, even more so than like all the Tiger King stuff, Joe Exotic and all that stuff. I know that that's very interesting as well because he's just a character and all the crazy shit that goes down in his world. But it's a different thing, and it's just really very, the way that they're presenting it, at least in this first episode, is really kind of, they're not giving it all to you at once, which I think is a good move to kind of keep you interested. And I think we talked about it before, maybe last week or prior weeks, like with what was the Netflix documentaries, the Untold series, where they're they're totally leaving the door open, be like, well, I don't think that I don't think that that's how this is going to play out at all, because that's not how it feels like to me, like Tiger King kind of plays out. So if this is going to go along the same kind of route, I'm all in.
I feel like, again, one episode, 1 hour. I think there's only 4 episodes. I don't know if there's
only
any
4
more coming
episode season.
Okay, that's kind of good. I'm okay with that. But So a quarter of the way through this, the biggest difference to me so far between this and Tiger King, because I think if you haven't, like, I think that's the easy comparison to make is Tiger King. It's same director and similar subject matter. I felt like with Tiger King, that was a show about Joe Exotic, who happened to have a lot of tigers and crazy shit going on around him. So far, this feels more like a show about these chimps that happens to have these. I don't know if I'm going to call them crazy yet. We'll see where it goes. I have a feeling it's going to get crazy, but these handlers, I guess we'll call them that, these handlers that, like I said, something feels off, and I haven't been able to 100% pin. I mean, and again, like you said, I'm kind of terrified of like chimps to that extent. Like I don't really want to fuck with them.
Yeah.
I'm not terrified of them, like in the sense like
healthy respect. It's
more than just, why is this nut job have, I think they said at one point she had like 49 or 50-ish type chimps at this, captive, this ranch. It's more than that. Like there's just something else that seems off, especially when they start showing him install all these like cameras. Like, well, where's that going to go? Like, why are we seeing this unless it's going to lead to something else? But so far, it feels more like we're watching the story about chimps as opposed to watching the story about this one central crazy person. Well, respectfully,
it's up in the air. It's only been one episode.
And that's very true. Like, I very well could be eating my words right off of my face by the time we get to the, next week. We'll see how it goes. But I will say it's done enough that I'm definitely going to go back and watch. I'll probably get through that by the end of the weekend.
What else you watch?
The only other thing I watched this week, I was kind of tooling around on Tubi, and I came across a Troma movie called Fraternity Demon, which is as colorful as it sounds. Basically, it's about a sex demon that comes to this college for some reason. Never really, or if it's explained, it wasn't explained well enough that I cared. Not the best movie. Like, I kind of wanted more sex demon, more sex, and more demoning all at the same time. But it does seem like she has the sex demon who barely looks like a demon at all. It's just like some kind of kooky goth. It's like discount Elvira in like more see-through lingerie. But she seems to give a lot of dudes hand jobs like to death. So that's kind of entertaining. Like there's one point where she jerks a dude off and then throws him by his boner like across the room into like a pile of boxes and stuff. So that was entertaining. Highbrow entertainment over here at Dewey Pod Monster Basement.
Sounds like a winner.
It is. You know what? I prefer it much over the topic of this episode, which I'm still pissed about.
Why don't we take a break and we'll talk about it?
That's why I was getting to. So we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about the 1985 television movie Playing with Fire, starring some fucker named Gary Coleman. We'll be right back. If you have a soft spot for nostalgia and all things pop culture related, then you need to check out Video Tasties on YouTube. You can find them at the You Run Podcast Network and also at youtube.com/@videotasties. Video Tasties features theatrical versus extended cut content, as well as retrospectives on TV shows, movies, video game reviews, and throwbacks. Basically, if it's anything from your past that you want to go back and relive, Video Tasties has a video for you that can let you do that.
And they're a member of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find them at yourunpodcast.com.
We're back. We are back, and we're going to be talking about as I mentioned, the 1985 television movie Playing with Fire. We start our episodes with third-party review. This review is on Letterboxd because this movie is not even listed on Rotten Tomatoes. That's how high a quality movie we're talking about here. And this review comes from Doom DeLuise. Not Dom, Doom DeLuise. And he says, our son, watching this with the ads still in the movie really helped my enjoyment. 2 out of 5 stars. Sean, what is Playing with Fire about?
So before we get to that, I do want to say this is another Internet Archive watchable movie, so it'll be linked in the show notes. And what Doom DeLuise says is that he watched it with the commercials. That's the Internet Archive version. It is available with commercials. But anyways, Playing with Fire, we head over to IMDb to find out all the particulars. This gets a 6.6 out of 10 with a whopping 83 ratings, because we know what you guys want to hear about, only the most popular movies. 83 ratings. We go to IMDb, look at the storyline and the plot. We look at the one on the top. Don't know what that one is, but it says made for TV film starring not so young Gary Coleman as a teenage arsonist. The authorities, friends, and neighbors warn his absentee parents until it is too late. And then we go down to the storyline. It says the exact same thing, made for TV film starring not so young Gary Coleman as a teenage arsonist. The authorities, friends, and neighbors warn his absentee parents until it is too late.
Yeah. So while you're going on there reading stuff off of IMDb, who's in this movie aside from Gary Coleman?
Yeah, so the big names that you may notice, I mean, you know, some of these people are recognizable.
If you watch it, they're going to tell you during every commercial break.
Yes,
So
they'll say Cicely Tyson, Ron O'Neal, and Yaphet Kotto. So Cicely Tyson she's dead now, but she was in a ton of stuff. If you see her, you know her. The biggest thing that she was in The Help most recently. That's probably the biggest recent thing she was in. She was in Fried Green Tomatoes. She's been in a ton of stuff. We have Ron O'Neal, who played Superfly, the named Superfly in the movie Superfly. We have Yaphet Kotto, who we've talked about him in Alien. He was also in the Gary Busey vehicle Eye of the Tiger. That's a favorite of mine. He was in, I believe, the original Heat of the Night, which got turned into a television show with, what's his face? What's that guy's name? The old guy played Archie Bunker. That guy. Carol O'Connor. That's who I was thinking of. And then we also have Rance Howard has a real small part. That's Clint and Ron Howard's dad. And there's just a couple other kind of people you might recognize. I won't really bring them up. One that I will bring up, though, who plays Gary Coleman, who is David Phillips. His friend, Tom Fridley, plays his friend, Mike. That's John Travolta's nephew. I didn't know that. He has last name is Fridley, and everybody else is Travolta. So I think he was trying to escape the Travolta name. Tom Fridley was in a Friday the 13th. Did you know that?
I did not. Which Friday the 13th is he in? Can we talk about that? Because it's a better movie than this.
Jason Lives. 6.
Okay. Well, you know what that makes? I think I know who he is in that movie now that you said it. I didn't place it at the time, but
He plays Court.
this movie also has Brad Savage, who I have no idea if this is factual, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. He's definitely the father of Fred Savage. We're just going to put it out there. No proof. Timeline does not line up at all. It's what it is.
Looks nothing like him.
Looks nothing like him. Probably doesn't even spell his name the same way.
Lots of other people like Jonathan Fudge Leonard. That's his name. Mark Phillips. Oh, that's Marky. That's the little brother.
So, Sean, why the hell did you decide that this was the movie that I had to watch?
Well, I mean, like, why not? Let me break down my storyline. I say Gary Coleman plays a, quote, young teen. We find out later in the movie, because they never really mention how old he's supposed to be until near the end. He's supposed to be a 15-year-old that has a much younger sister and little brother.
What? I thought they said it earlier, but okay.
He's got a much younger sister and little brother that seemingly get all the attention from mom and dad. His parents are going through a divorce, but they don't really say it until much later in the movie. And they don't really have time to give Gary Coleman, David, the attention that he needs. So he turns to lighting small fires at first. The movie really progresses from him starting these little fires. Like I know the reason that John doesn't like this movie, and I knew instantly. We kind of breaking the fourth wall here. We never discuss movies before we talk about them on this show. But can you tell our audience, can you share with the audience the text message that you sent like immediately after starting this?
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to try and guess and pinpoint as to when you sent it, what happened on the screen.
My exact words were, well, I'm 1 minute in and I fucking hate this movie already.
So can I guess why that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure you know.
So,
but
no,
yeah.
I don't know because we didn't talk about it. Gary Coleman's playing basketball out in the driveway, right? He's like, oh, Dr. J, blah, blah, blah.
I think you know because you talk to me on a regular basis.
Dr. J going up, yay, Magic Johnson blocks the shot. And the mom, Cicely Tyson, pulls in and she's like, oh, Fred, which is the dog, because this has a dog component. Fred, you need to grow up. So they're walking up towards the stairs and Gary Coleman says, Fred, why don't you get out of the way? You need to grow up. And he hits him with the basketball. He hits the dog with the basketball. And that's immediately when I saw that and I saw your text, you're like, not a minute in, I knew we were off to a very bad start.
Yeah, and then he doubles down on it like a minute later and tries to light the dog on fire. I'm like, dude, someone beat this kid within an inch of his life, please. Like, the problem I have with this movie with the basketball, like, you know, we talked about the movie Halloween and I gave that movie a 10 out of 10. Like, it's one of my favorite movies and they kill a dog in that movie. Now, here's the difference. That clearly is not a real dog that they had, like, that it's out of frame. It's not meant to look real. I don't think there's any budget for effects in this. I think Gary Coleman actually pegged this dog with a basketball and then tried to set it on fire. And for that, this whole fucking movie, I don't care what it does. This could be Citizen Kane of Gary Coleman setting shit on fire. fuck this entire movie. Fuck everyone
He
that
doesn't
makes
hit
it.
the
I hate
dog
it.
with a basketball.
He hit the. I don't care if he hit him or not.
bounces
You
a
don't
ball
do that.
Next on the ground. There's not
Fuck
a shot of a dog
this
at all.
movie.
And the dog scampers away. That's what they show. They don't show a dog getting hit by a fucking basketball. They don't show, Fred. He doesn't light the dog on fire. But let's just get into that while we're talking about the lighting shit on fire. So he's like got the lighter, like a cigarette lighter, a Bic or whatever. And it's like where you jack the dial all the way. So it's like the biggest flame possible, like the Beavis
Yeah,
flame.
you can take the safety thing off of it and it goes,
it's like shooting it like
6
a
inches
foot in the air.
Yeah.
And he's like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He's going to chase the dog around. The dog runs away and he has the thing lit. Gary Coleman, David Phillips clearly has no idea how fire works. And he turns with the thing lit and he lights a coat rack on fire. Mom, the coats, they're on fire, fire, fire. And the mom runs out and they knock the coat rack outside. They spray it with the hose. And she's like, David, how did this happen? And he said, I don't know, must be those wires. And they show the typical like 80s power outlet with like the octopus of all the wires and shit. And she's like, David, those have been there for years. And he says, I don't know, could have been old. I mean, could have been old or something. I don't know, maybe they're old. Yeah, that's how fires work.
This movie came out in 1985. That child would have been beaten to fucking back because he lit a fire in his house and then lied about it. He would have been beaten with the like still hot ashes of that goddamn coat hook that he let on fire. And I would have been fine with that. And this could have been a 5-minute movie, and then the dog could have pissed on him.
Dead.
Roll credits. Fuck him.
They would have saved that damn dog.
You know what? I don't care about the human. I care about the dog.
I don't get upset when kids die in movies. Most of the time, I rejoice.
I don't get upset about kids dying in movies either.
I have kids.
I get upset about...
I don't have a dog. Couldn't care less about a dog. I don't even like dogs.
Anyway, you do okay with my dog.
He's fine. I tolerate him. He's all right.
He likes you.
Dogs like everybody until they don't.
That's not true. Yeah, that's not true.
Until they don't.
Yeah. Well, so after Gary Coleman is a little shithead to his dog and tries to light his own house on fire the first time, he goes to school and apparently sets some garbage on fire to prove a point, I guess.
He likes it's like all McDonald's wrappers and shit.
It's like the most overfilled,
McDonald's wrapper filled can of garbage.
It's like a garbage can that like is honestly begging to be lit on fire. There's that much like dry paper in it.
I mean, I would have lit it on fire. Greasy hamburger paper. I would have lit the thing on fire.
Yeah, it's a pretty, honestly, like, there's so many things about this. This is a made-for-TV movie. I don't know if this was originally aired as, like, a primetime movie or... Oh, no, it says right here. It's 8 p.m.
There you go. Prime time.
Right on the poster. This feels more like an after-school movie. Like,
it does.
Trying to, like, give you the impression, like, fire is bad, but divorce is also bad. So be miserable for 18 years until your kids learn how to fucking deal with emotions or, don't beat them when they attack your dog.
Or light fires.
Or like, whatever. Yeah, semantics. So, yeah, he goes to school, lights this fire in a trash can. Friday the 13th, kid's like, what the fuck are you doing, Gary Coleman? And then Yaphet Kotto shows up and he's like, the fuck are you doing, Gary Coleman? And he's like, what you talking about, firefighter? I ain't doing nothing.
What you talking about, Yaphet?
Exactly. Says that. And basically everyone just goes, huh?
Yeah.
Guess he doesn't know anything.
I guess it wasn't him. It's crazy.
Right. Crazy. He's,
It progressively gets worse and worse where he lights a field on his. Okay, so let's just get into this. The parents in this movie are absolutely atrocious. I mean, they are totally to blame for this kid just being a total shithead, and they take no responsibility for it. And the dad is like fooling around on the mom in front of Gary Coleman and the kids, because Gary Coleman technically is a kid, but he's like, here, give this to your mother. It's the support check. Like, they're not even divorced yet. And he's with a woman, and he's like, yeah, Gary, you might be wanting to tap this one day too. And then he drives away, and Gary Coleman like rolls up the check, the envelope with the check, like a tightly wound joint, and he lights it on fire and sticks it through a fence and lights an entire field ablaze. The mom drives by.
It's like the driest field in Missouri. It's like all of a sudden he's in the middle of like California right now. And
I think he is in California.
I think that's, why did I say Missouri? I think he is in California.
Chimp crazy.
Too. That's right. Fucking chimps.
Still on your mind.
Yeah, clearly.
Rent free.
But you nailed it about these parents. These parents are so fucking concerned about getting their genitals played with by someone who isn't their partner, which fine. I mean, do what you got to do. But like to the point where they multiple times through this shit show of a movie are like, oh, we really need to spend some time with Gary Coleman here and, make him seem more like David, whatever we're calling him in this movie. We really got to spend some time here with Gary Coleman and teach him how not to be a little shit that lights things on fire. And then within seconds, they're like, but I got to go get my dick sucked first. See you later, bitch. And then he's out the door.
Fuck
and
those kids.
Right. Or the mom's like, oh, well, I got this dress on. I better go out and, ride this guy who came into my house and told my kid that I'm going to bone your mom or whatever.
I'm going to be your new dad. You're not my dad.
Like
You'll
that.
never be my dad. He has a real chip on his shoulder about anybody calling him son. That's what it is. Son is like his trigger word. If you call me son, I'm going to light your fucking house on fire. That's what I do. And nobody says anything to me. Lawless.
You know what? If they took the dog scenes out and replaced it with that line, I might have enjoyed this movie. So
why don't we just recut it for you?
You know what? You probably could.
But he just progressively gets worse and worse. So it starts off with the coat rack, then it's the garbage can at school, then it's the field, then it's a bush at the school because the principal calls him son. So he just to get attention, he ramps up and ramps up and ramps up. And what is he? He eventually ends up.
Most of these are in broad daylight too, like in front of a school and on the side of
Yeah, he's standing there. He gets his jollies. He's the thing about the school I think is hilarious because there's just some poor janitor or whatever, groundskeeper, driving a riding lawnmower around with a gas can in the back of his lawnmower.
As you do.
And Gary Coleman's there practically licking his lips watching it go by. He's like, I'm gonna really love lighting that fucking thing on fire. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. And then they're like, Gary. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, seriously, I'm good. We're good here. I'll be better. And then immediately leaves, takes the gas can out, looks around as if nobody can see him. And he's still, oh yeah, I'm going to light this fucking fire, man. I'm so fucking hopped up about lighting this fire. And he hides the gas can. Night comes. Yeah, I'm just going to light this shit on fire. Fuck it.
I was really, really hoping, because you could, this movie is very easy to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like I said, he keeps getting worse and worse. This is very, very linear as far as what is going on in this movie.
And it's all up.
I was going to hope that was going to go up in flames because when he had that gas can, I was like, how great it would be if this thing just fucking blew the fuck up in his hands. Like if he was sitting there playing with the gas and, pulled out his Bic lighter and all of a sudden, bam, that would have been a plot twist I did not expect. But we didn't get that. He just lights the bush on fire and then Yaphet Kotto shows up. He's like, you motherfucker, you're here every time that I come to put out a fire. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, Yaphet Kotto. And rides away on his bike.
What you talking about, Kotto? It would have been a really great, it would have made the turning point to be a great after school movie if he would have blown his hands off. That would have been like, hey, Don't play with fire. Don't be stupid. You'll blow your hands off. It's like the Red Ryder BB gun. You'll shoot your eye out, except you'll blow your hands off.
Yeah, pretty much. But as we said, that's how it happens. It keeps getting worse. After his mom's boyfriend tells him, smacks him in the face with his crotch on accident and says, I'm gonna be your dad. And he calls him son.
I'm gonna be your dad, son.
Was he proceed to randomly light every garment he can find of his mother's on fire while throwing it on the bed, turning the house into I don't know, a scene from Backdraft all of a sudden? It's the biggest fire that I've seen in a shitty movie in quite some time. And this house, well, they do explain it that didn't they say there's a gas leak in the house or something that causes a small explosion? Which
there is a gas heater on the wall and he throws a lit dress or something on it. And there's the little mini explosion that you see in all the special effects packs that you see on YouTube. It's great. It's very good.
Yeah. But I love I don't love it. I fucking think it's funny that I don't love it. This movie sucks. But I think it's funny that he won in the most seemingly flammable room of the house, because the way this house goes up, it's this house has just been sitting here drying out since the 20s, waiting for the smallest amber of flame to come and just set it ablaze. Somehow it contains this fire that goes from 0 to 100 in seconds. It contains it to just the mother's bedroom. So they find themselves after this living in the house that's all burnt to shit with a giant chunk of the house missing. It's just put a tarp on it. It's cool. But not only does that happen, we also get to see Gary Coleman firefighter at one point where he goes and drags his half-awake siblings through the smoke because they wake up and go out of the bed after
collapse.
he wakes them up and
near death.
Doesn't she go back to bed?
Yeah,
she goes
kinda.
back in her bedroom.
Yeah. And she's
So-
like, oh, I'm so tired. It's too smoky here. How'd it get so smoky? It's time for bed. Good night.
Dog was smart enough to get out of the house. So
It did.
so-
It didn't need help either. It
Yeah.
just was like, fuck this place. I'm out of here. Place is a dump. Explosions next to the heater.
So after all this shit, Gary Coleman finds himself in the principal's office with Yaphet Kotto again. And they're at the point now where they're like, no, we're done accusing you. You fucking obviously did this, you little shit. They still don't beat his ass. But basically, his dad says something to the effect of like, we'll pay for the damage to the school. We're not going to press charges on him. It's our house. What's the fucking problem? The problem is your son is committing fucking felonies. He almost killed your 2 other children. Forget the fact that, like, I don't know how much that damage would cost in $1985, but you're looking at like $100,000 worth of repairs by that point in 2024 dollars, or I would assume, like,
Especially in California.
yeah, like you're not looking at like a small amount of like that house. There's a good chance that like your insurance company is just gonna be like, yeah, no,
Yeah, get fucked.
it's done. Yeah. So especially if they can prove that it's an arson from your own son, like I imagine that throws a wrench in shit.
The insurance company sends a letter. They open it and a red rubber stamp just says, get fucked.
Yeah. And Gary Coleman, I always call him Gary Busey. Gary Coleman burns it. Gary Busey burning it would actually add a lot of. If Gary Busey just showed up and started going on pyro adventures with Gary Coleman, I would watch that movie.
If Gary Coleman lit Gary Busey on fire, top notch. 10 out of 10.
His teeth just stay alive to tell the rest of the story.
Chattering teeth.
They got a little wind up thing on the back. So yeah, long story short, after Gary Coleman burns down his fucking house, or part of his house, he basically, the last like, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes of this movie is essentially him going to like Pyros Anonymous and different forms of like pyro rehab, all under the tutelage of Yaphet Kotto. I didn't get the impression that they really fixed anything. I just got the impression that they're like, all right, it's a little more vibrant color now. And now he's the guy giving the like, I used to burn shit too speech to the new pyro in town. Like this town is just filled with fucking pyros, lighting everything on fire that they can, and then getting jobs at the firehouse to tell other pyros like, I used to burn shit too. Now look at me. I'm here telling you not to burn shit.
But just a secret, this stuff burns really good.
Yeah, that too.
Your mom's polyester clothes, they burn real good.
Especially if you put them by the gas leak in your house.
Yes.
Which, yeah. Am I missing anything? I mean, that's pretty much how this wraps up.
Well, I mean, this movie is like a big, you can watch this because it's 85. It aired on TV, so it has all the commercials and all that stuff, like we said. So it's fun to watch all the little commercial breaks and stuff in between. And I do want to comment on
definitely the highlight of the film.
I do want to comment on the news brief that gets played in this video, because there is a 1985 like, hey, we don't have time to tell you the whole news because, yeah, who gives a shit? So let's just tell you about these few stories. But the thing that you watch this movie and you really tell that like mental health has come a long way since 1985, because they send the family to therapy, basically the parents, because they're shit parents. And, you know, they let the old kid, you know, basically light their house on fire. And the mom is just like, you therapist, this is a TV PG movies, but in not so many words, she's like, you're a fucking idiot and I'm a doctor. And when we send people to therapy, they always come back and they're worse and you do nothing. And she has a mental breakdown, which, hey, I think maybe there's something to this whole therapy thing that you might need to go to. But they totally refuse to go. And they cannot see that it's possibly them fucking around on each other that are the real problem of all this stuff. And I don't know, it's just played, like you said, the story is very linear, and you can almost they almost foreshadow, or at least you can tell, just being a TV viewer in this day and age, you're like, oh, I know where this is going. It's very like, the acting is very saccharine, it's very like corny, just the shit that happens is corny. And I think of Yaphet Kotto in this movie, like we talked about Adam West in Night of the Kickfighters, where he must have just been on set for like 3 days and they paid him like an hourly wage.
Granted, he's a fire marshal or whatever,
He's
so
the
he
chief.
should have a uniform. Is he the chief? Whatever.
It just
Same
says
thing.
fire on his patch on his shoulder.
It's like he's in the exact same way. It doesn't look like he was offset for more than one day, because he looks like head to toe
Exactly
dressed
the same.
exactly the same.
Yeah.
Now, I say that knowing that a uniform is going to look pretty similar from day to day, but you can kind of tell when it looks like someone changed their clothes. Like, even if it's like, oh, he's got a fresh shirt on.
He didn't even get it
maybe
pressed.
put a jacket on.
He slept in
Yeah.
it every
It's
day.
got the same McDonald's. It's got the same McDonald's saying from the first fire on the, he's like, oh, this one's still got some cheese on it.
Hey, I like it. Cheese paper, my favorite.
Yeah.
I want to talk. Do you have any commercials that you watched there that you saw on here that you're like, that's a good commercial? I like those.
The news break, I don't remember what it is about now, but I remember laughing at it for some reason or finding it like, that's interesting. I like that the performance cars are like, it was like a Pontiac sedan.
That's the one I wrote a note specifically. It's a Pontiac Grand Am.
Yeah. It does not look like a performance car, especially by 2024 standards.
It looks like they did one of those things where they wet the entire road so they could drive it on wet pavement essentially, and they sped up the film. But the car looks so wobbly. Every time they're like coming around a corner or they're going over a hill or something, it just it looks like the whole thing's just going to shake all the body parts off of it and it's just going to be a frame at the last few seconds of the commercial. I wanted to comment on the news break specifically. So one of the stories is about Jack Burcham, who happened to be like the 5th person who ever received an artificial heart. And they say in the report, this is what a direct quote.
It was a snug fit.
Yeah. Chest cavity was a tight fit for the heart. So I looked it up on Wikipedia, and Jack Burcham was the 4th and final patient to receive this specific heart called a Jarvik 7, which Jarvik was one of the other doctors. It says the final patient to receive a Jarvik 7 as a destination therapy, meaning they took him to this thing to have the surgery done. Burcham received his heart on April 14th, 1985. So that means that this broadcast would have been the 14th or the 15th. But due to complications from the size of the device, bleeding and kidney failure, Burcham died 10 days later on April 25th, 1985. What a poor fucker. And they're almost like making light of it during the news. Like, oh, they said they got it in there, but it was a tight fit. Like, holy shit. I imagine one of the doctors was just standing on the gurney and the other foot was just like
a hammer,
pushing it with his foot. Like, oh, get it in there. God damn it. Get that thing in there.
I also kind of thought like, well, I wouldn't expect it to be a loose fit. Like you wouldn't want to just like
just
bouncing around in there either, right?
Bouncing around.
I don't know. There were a couple other commercials that I found the commercials are by far the most entertaining thing to watch in this, just because you see so many differences from, 1985 to 30 years later, 40 years later.
Yeah, almost.
But yeah, I don't really have much else with it. Like, I think it's pretty obvious where I'm going to fall on this one, but yeah, shocker. So,
well, I do want to, I like to have a takeaway from every movie that I watch. And what I mean by that is I like to have like lessons that I learn from movies. Sometimes they're obvious and sometimes they're not.
Fire bad,
bread good. That's I've known that for a long time. That's been a
good
leading principle in my life. The other thing is, the thing that I really learned from this movie is that you probably shouldn't tell your kids they're an accident because it'll fuck them up. Do you know anybody who was told they were an accident by their parents?
Me.
Your parents told you that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that explains
multiple times.
Okay. Well, sorry, John. I apologize.
Yeah.
I was going to make light of it. No, I'm not.
You can make light of it. I haven't lit anything on fire that wasn't intentional and wasn't controlled in the proper, like I've lit campfires or like, stuff like that, but I haven't done any arson that I'm aware of.
I had a bit of an unhealthy obsession with fire for a little bit. Like I never lit my house on fire or anything, but I used to like to take coffee cans, like the tin cans, and roll up newspaper and put it in and light it with like rubbing alcohol or something, light it on fire and have a little hobo stove out in the yard. That was always fun. I was going to say,
that's just a hobo stove. You're just a survivalist. It's okay.
I burnt my finger with the car lighter once when I was little because I pressed it in and I put it on my finger. That wasn't a good idea. No. I grabbed the edge, the part that like slides in, that pops out. I grabbed it when I was a little kid and it burnt my fingers. I also stapled my fingers together, so that doesn't really bode well for me, but I'm all right now. I've turned out okay.
See, maybe you should tell your kids they're accidents and they won't pick up cigarette lighters and staple their hands together.
Fingers, just fingers,
it's
not hands.
Part of the hand. If I took anything away from this movie, it's that I don't need to watch made-for-TV movies if I can avoid it.
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
You love this movie so much. I want to hear you go first and hear your opinion.
I mean, my opinion is going to be pretty quick and to the point. I award you no hot dogs. You get a 0 out of 10. Fuck everyone involved with this movie. I hate this movie. I hate everything about it. It sucks. Watch something else.
You like this less than you like Bukkake Bus.
I would rather watch Bukkake Bus.
Wow.
I would rather watch In a Violent Nature 4 times in a row for like a week straight.
Wow. I didn't expect this at all. I thought you'd at least find some pleasure, some humor in the movie. You didn't laugh at anything in this movie. I mean, I'm not going to talk you out of your 0. Well, I mean, that's
I
something.
laughed at some of the commercials. Hey, there's little things that are kind of funny about it, but when you start your movie by, giving a dog shit, doesn't matter. I don't
Giving a
care
dog
what it is.
shit.
No, it doesn't matter.
You are very sensitive. You're a very sensitive man. I applaud you.
You know what? I don't have a lot of morals, but the ones I do often involve not humans.
All right, so I guess it's my turn.
Whose hot dog is this, huh? Is it yours?
Nah.
So I'm just going to say, as I mentioned earlier, this movie is just total proof that mental health has come a long way in 40 years. The seriousness of how shitty parents can really fuck up a kid is basically laughed off through inept overacting and a totally unrealistic portrayal of a teenager, aka Gary Coleman, a 15-year-old. He's a 15-year-old arson. I found it hilarious. I know Gary Coleman was in a shit ton of made-for-TV movies, but I kind of wonder, I didn't look at his IMDb because he's got a lot of credits, and I wonder if this was kind of trying to move him out of being the Arnold, whatever his name is in Different Strokes, like get him out of that kind of role of being like the comedic actor or whatever, like the kid basically, hey, he's short and we play him for laughs. I wonder if this is trying to give him a bit more of like an edgy take. Either way, I thought this movie was hilarious. I thought it was a laugh riot, especially the first hour or so. All the commercials and everything. I feel like even the dog getting hit by the basketball, I thought that was the best part of the whole movie. If I can be honest, no, I'm kidding. I didn't think that was great, but whatever. I just kind of laughed it off. Like, this kid's a fucking shithead. I thought the commercials were great. I love watching stuff like that. Like I said, I'm going to link the Internet Archive version, so you'll be able to see those commercials and maybe get a little nostalgia for it. I would say Playing with Fire isn't a masterpiece, but I overlooked the dog getting hit with a basketball, so I thought it was a good time. I give it 6 exploding gas heaters out of 11 hot dogs.
He's actually not that far off from 15 in this movie. He was born in 1968, so 1985. He would have only been 17. That's not the worst casting you could think of for a 15-year-old. The problem is he's Gary Coleman, and he looked like Gary Coleman all the way up.
3'10".
Well, sure, but I mean, that's a different conversation altogether. But there's certainly more, I don't know if egregious is the right word, because but there's certainly more larger age gaps in people that portrayed 15-year-olds than what Gary Coleman's doing in this movie.
Yeah, he wasn't like 27 or 30 or something like all the original 90210 cast was.
Anyone who's ever been in a Friday the 13th movie, except for that one chick in part 2. So we usually do a question of the week, and we tried to do one this week, but no one answered it. So fuck it. That's fine. We can move on a little bit quicker.
John is so salty. You should see the way he's looking at me right now. Daggers.
Daggers, yes. Lighters. I've one somewhere around here, I'm
Lighter.
sure. So, yeah. Since no one answered the question of the week, we're not even going to fucking bother with it. So,
what was the question of the week? It won't skew anything. You couldn't have read into this or anything.
The question of the week is, this movie is bullshit. What do you do now?
Well, we talk about it on this podcast.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what we do. On the plus side, Horrorween starts next week, so we get to move away from this bullshit and move on to a much more flavorful pile of bullshit. I don't know what we're talking about
Take a
yet.
big spoonful.
I have an idea, but yeah, we're going to shove a big spoonful of something better. So if you want to be, involved in the show, we would appreciate that. We'll put a new question of the week up next week, which I might put more effort into, probably. If you want to answer that, you can find us all over the place. We're on social media at Dewey Pod Monster. Easy to search us, easy to find us. That's where it is. You can also find all of our previous episodes, new episodes, and upcoming episodes at crap.town, which is our site, or at yourunpodcast.com. While you're there, make sure to check out some of the other shows. They're all great. Lots of good stuff on there. Support us. Support the people who support us. That's probably good. Sean, what else?
I was going to say, if you want your question of the week question of the week answer read on this show, you could follow us on social media and answer our question of the week on social media. Nobody did it this week, but it's because John hates Gary Coleman and dogs. So otherwise, if you want to...
Don't hate dogs.
Thanks again
I
for
like
everybody
dogs.
that's been answering the poll questions on the Spotify website, leaving comments. If you could leave or rate or review this show, leave this show. If you could rate or review this show on your podcast platform of choice, it helps spread the word. And we get more people interested in great movies like Playing with Fire, a 1985 made-for-TV movie starring Gary Coleman. Also, we leave links to all the stuff we talk about in the show notes. If you click it and you buy something through one of those links, most of the Amazon links, we get like $1 or $2 for every billion that you spend. And if you're interested in following my craft beer adventures, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com or find me on all the social media networks. I don't know where that accent came from, but I'm on at Draft Therapy.
We forgot. We also have a YouTube channel, which apparently is getting policed by some invisible force because of a link on a page that isn't YouTube or I don't know. Something involving urine and eating it out of a snow cone. Should be fun. Check that out. Urine eating, fire, dogs. We'll be back next week. Have a great week. Cheers.
Blah, blah, blah.
He's dead. I can call him a fucker, right?
No, they found him. He was actually just hiding out. What you talking about, Yaphet, Kodo?
There wasn't one what you talking about in this entire fucking movie.